I see that South Asia confronts three critical nuclear challenges. The first, which is different than the troubles that we had during the Cold War, is that South Asia is home to active territorial disputes between nuclear weapons powers. That means the militaries of these states bump up against one another, occasionally with fatal results. And whenever militaries are fighting, there is a danger of escalation, and that danger is fundamentally different than the proxy fights between the US and the Soviet Union during the Cold War. We have nuclear powers that are not continents apart. They're not separated by oceans. They might be separated by mountains, but sometimes they're just separated by a few yards. And that brings with it a danger that I think we're going to have to adapt to. Another critical nuclear challenge in South Asia is that the parties are locked into a multilateral arms competition. So no single pairing of states is able to stop the Asian arms race. China worries about the United States. India worries about China. Pakistan worries about India. And so India has difficulty even thinking of arms control measures that it could do with Pakistan that wouldn't permit China to outrace it. And similarly, the United States is so far ahead of China on nuclear matters. Beijing is considering modernization and expansion of its nuclear arsenal rather than thinking about arms control. And this creates a potential nuclear cascade through Asia, where developments in the United States race down into China, then India, and then on into Pakistan. And it's very difficult to break that cycle. A final nuclear challenge that faces South Asia, frankly, faces the entire world, which is that there's a technological revolution going on in the ease by which anyone, and certainly a powerful state, can find things on the surface of the Earth. Space-based sensors, especially relatively cheap commercial satellite options, are dramatically expanding every day, and they're permitting even middle powers to have visibility on what is going on in their neighborhood, even across the world. So they can see things that they couldn't used to see. They can see vehicles, maybe even traveling down a road. And on top of that growing ability to see what an adversary is doing with their nuclear forces, there's been a simultaneous revolution in precision strike weapons, making it easier states, giving them the ability to send missiles and bombs vast distances to targets that they can identify. So it's harder for countries to guarantee their nuclear weapons will survive an adversary's attempts to disarm them. And that makes militaries nervous. And when militaries are nervous, they want to buy more weapons, and they want to use those weapons earlier in a fight. And that is dangerous for arms race stability, that's dangerous in a crisis, and that's dangerous for all of us. You know, the U.S. needs to take the lead by stopping this pointless arms competition with Russia. It seems as if the Biden administration is going to take the right steps with at least renewing this New START treaty. But the arms competition with Russia also has knock-on effects with China. And the previous administration made it quite clear that they were willing and maybe even eager to engage in a nuclear arms competition with China. And I think that's foolish. China's too strong now. It's economically too powerful for the United States to be able to beat it in a nuclear arms race. China will always have the ability to spend a little bit more money and make sure it has a surviving nuclear arsenal. And so what we're doing by telling China that we want to beat them in an arms race is we're provoking them to engage in a race. And it's pointless. We're going to waste our money. China has relatively few nuclear weapons. It's persisted with having relatively few nuclear weapons throughout the entire Cold War, despite having opponents in the Soviet Union and Russia and the United States with far, far more weapons. And we have to arrest this cascading arms competition that starts with decisions made in Washington, but passes through Asia and winds up in Islamabad. This is something that's within the United States' control. And at a minimum, the United States needs to do no harm. Now, that doesn't mean that the countries in the region can't do things. I think India and Pakistan and India and China can both think of creative ways to try to disengage their conventional militaries and decrease spending on tanks and other weapons that I think, frankly, are probably not going to be used because of the dangers involved with a serious military conflict now in the modern era. And importantly, it's crucial that Pakistan and to a lesser extent India forswear the use of terrorists and proxies as an attempt to achieve their political aims. As long as terrorists are having safe haven in the neighborhood, but engaged in violence that's killing civilians and officials in the neighboring state, that's a spark that could start a fire, and that's a danger here when everyone has nuclear weapons. The international community has sort of given up on nuclear-related arms control initiatives, but I think there is still some progress that can be made in a few areas. I think it would be useful to go back and to see if we can stop this unlimited, unrestricted expansion of fissile material. Pakistan and India both have active programs to produce plutonium and highly enriched uranium. And the US and the Soviet Union found that once the laboratories and nuclear reactors get going and the scientists are producing fissile material, it's very difficult to get them to stop without a good reason. And I think progress in Geneva or elsewhere on the fissile material cutoff treaty is something that needs to be looked at again. This material is dangerous, even besides the fact that it can go into weapons that states could use. Having it lying around can be dangerous, and it doesn't serve much purpose. I would hope that international diplomats can focus on that. And then there's new arenas for competition where I think people should renew their focus. The potential for violence, destruction in space through space weapons has kind of been on the radar for a while, but it's been viewed as too hard, and developments with missile defense and anti-satellite weapons have been allowed to go on unrestricted. And I would also hope that the international community can look at ways to prevent weapons from being used in space and potentially damaging early warning targets, but also making space unusable if there were a conflict that involved widespread use of weapons in space.